gonna be on camera, I'd be what you call it? An
Nah, we're
iron
live right
chili.
now. Nah, you don't got to, man. You just gotta be you. So go ahead and hit
Yeah,
live on this recording. Give it a second for the YouTube
gonna
to
be
stop
on
playing.
camera, I'd be what you call it? An
Nah, we're
iron
live right
chili.
now. Nah, you don't got to, man. You just gotta be. Wear a tux. All right, let me hit record on this. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. Today's show is going to be an interesting show because I've known this dude for roughly close to 30 years, right? Like we go back from elementary school, high school, college, and we've always overlapped. It's kind of like looking like a double helix. Like over the years, we've overlapped our paths multiple different times, and it's kind of like it's good to have one of those elementary school level friends in the game with you as far as like business strategy, bouncing ideas off of. So you name whoever I'm interviewing a particular nickname. So in this particular episode, I'm going to name this dude the visionary boss for obvious reasons. So the floor is yours. Why don't you tell people like your name, who you are, what do you do, and why are you here today?
So my name is Stephan Garcia. I am a consultant by trade, operations, finance, capital consulting, entrepreneurship, business development. That's a lot of kind of like summarizes everything that I do, but really I'm an entrepreneur. I solve problems for other people, or I solve problems for myself and for the work that I do. So that's kind of like the 5 cents tour. What was the other question?
So I think you knocked that one out the box, right? So I mean, obviously you wear multiple hats. So going into like another question to kind of like dive a little bit deeper into who you are. I mean, if you could define yourself in 3 to 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be?
I'm definitely a believer. I think I'm led by my faith. I'm definitely an entrepreneur and creative.
Nice. So let's just stay on this time traveling journey. Like I remember we was riding the train back in Brooklyn, going to middle school, doing all this crazy shit back in the day, right? So don't pee on yourself right away with the memory relapse, right? So like let's like how the hell do we go from being like Brooklyn knuckleheads, like literally we're Brooklyn knuckleheads, right? Going to elementary school and doing shit like that to like the business that you're in. I mean, you rattle off essentially you're talking about finance, you're talking about business development, you're talking about strategy. How the hell you go from riding the D train to being where you are today?
That's a good question. Just quick flashback, by the way. Remember this incident on the train?
The iPhone?
When me and Ann got hemmed up on the way to a shower.
Brooklyn will teach you how to get got and how to get as well. So
yeah, so in terms of how I got to where I'm at, we obviously grew up in Brooklyn. I think when you went out to Georgia, we went out to Long Island. My family and I went out to you and your family went out to Georgia. We went out to Long Island. So it gave me a good kind of like understanding of what it's like to grow up in Brooklyn, that kind of urban environment. And I think I was living in Brooklyn all the way through my second year of high school, and then my junior year, I went to high school in Long Island. So it gave me kind of that diversity of like experience, right? You grew up in that rough, Brooklyn environment, and you have a sensibility that it forces you to have that awareness, that kind of like street sense, that common sense, essentially, that New York common sense. And then you go to Long Island, there's white picket fences, and you're living near the water, and it's like lawn, like actual lawn, right? Like, backyards and stuff like that. You have a whole new language. You have, football games and like all the stuff, and it was a different environment, right? And those two things, and you have a much more diverse and sometimes a little bit more homogenous space that you're, in terms of the social space that you're working in, you're living in, and you have to kind of like think differently a little bit. But I think both things really shaped kind of like my view. One gave me a lot of common sense, and one gave me the ability to appreciate, the both sides. I love being in the city, and I also love being in Long Island or out of the city, just generally speaking. Long Island, but just outside of the city.
Nice.
So for me, you know, one of the key things for me was always like problem solving. Like I think, you know, when you're in and out of these different spaces, you have to think about like life in terms of like, you know, I think about things in terms of like what is I'm trying to accomplish, and there's a problem and I'm trying to figure out a solution for that situation. And that applied like literally throughout my entire life. You know, I've done everything. I was going to send you a write-up on like all the stuff that I've done. I mean, like, you know, I think the other component to who I am is I'm completely open to trying new things. And I think one of my first jobs was a dog groomer in Brooklyn, and a vet. I've driven trucks. I had my CDL. I've driven forklifts in factories. I've packed 18 wheelers with boxes in the middle of summer. I have, you know, one of my first businesses at 19 was with two close friends of mine, and we were doing music. We had we had two artists, and one was a rapper and one was a singer. And, you know, it was back in the day when Diddy was doing his thing, and it was like, you know, the upcoming era of rap and like that lifestyle. And, you know, I always loved music, and I thought, hey, yeah, 100%. I get to build a company with my friends. That's goals right there. That's like, and this was at 19. This was like my first ever like attempt at building a company. And we had a fun time, and like we made good music. I think we made good music. We didn't ever put anything out, or anything, you know, on the radio, but we definitely recorded a bunch of music, and we had to finance it all. We were throwing parties around New York City and Queens and Jersey and stuff like that. But yeah, that was the first experience that came to an end when it got a little dicey at some of those parties. And, you know, when you're throwing parties in the hood stuff happens. And, you know, for me, it was kind of like a reflection point on, you know, what do I really want to do, and kind of where do I want to go? So I changed over to, when I left college, I changed over to banking, and, you know, we can get into all of that, but yeah, that's kind of the trajectory.
So gotcha. So you went from doing like parties and events to like banking. So like my next question is going to be, I mean, obviously you're talking about like hood philosophy and crazy stuff happening in the parties, but obviously on banking, there's crazy shit that happens there as well too. So between both these environments, between the party and the banking, what is the craziest thing that's ever happened to you while working?
I mean, a lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff.
I was gonna say hierarchy. Pick one. Pick the one. I mean, was it the naked dude pissing on like a sign, drinking urine out of a hat? Like, what was the worst example of something that's happened?
Worst example of something that's happened. Doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone has a career, has history and worked somewhere. So I mean, what's that landmark thing that you visually see?
Yeah, I think the thing that for me that was a trajectory change was definitely 9/11. Like, and I hate to bring up 9/11 as kind of like a thing, but like I was legitimately, the branch that I worked at, when I say banking, I was in retail banking. So this is like my first job out of college, like really out of college. So when I got the job, I was working at with Anthony down with Ant down in Battery Park, which is literally across the street from the World Trade Center. And I think that was legitimately the worst thing I've experienced. And, you know, we were there that morning. The branch is on the street level. And I was sitting in the bench and heard the first explosion. The entire building shook. I mean, literally the entire building shook. It kind of did that Matrix thing where the windows kind of blowed out. And then all you see is cabs and people running in the street, and you're like, what is going on? So go outside and someone's like, hey, a plane hit the building. I was like, what are you talking about? And there's like a little fire on the south side because it hit the North Tower. And, you know, all I could see was that little thing. I was like, oh, it must have been like a really tiny plane. And, you know, I'm sitting outside and they're like, no, it's like a huge thing. It's a big fire. It's like, what are you talking about? All I can see is this little fire. And I'm standing legitimately within like, I don't know how long that block is, but like one block one half of a city block away from both towers, like on the other side of the West Side Highway. And in the corner of my eye, coming from south going north, is the second plane. And I'm literally standing outside underneath one of these towers, and I see the second plane come in, and it impacts the building. And I'm like, holy, like it, I can't describe it. It's pointless. Like you've seen, everyone's seen the videos, and I don't want to take up too much time on this because it seems like I'm pandering, but I don't want to, but that was the worst day. Like we stayed until the first building fell. We were in the bank trying to secure the cash and, wait for HQ to tell us what to do. And we stayed until the first building fell. And after the first building fell, it was utter chaos. It was insane. That was the worst experience working anything.
I think it's definitely a testament to, living in New York, right? So, I mean, even after that, one, you never left New York, right? You never left banking. And obviously the anybody knows anything about the Twin Towers, there was a lot of financial stuff going on within those towers. Yeah. So you kind of took that experience, and it seems like it drove you to dive deeper into that space. I mean, correct me if I'm right or wrong. I mean, like after witnessing that, I mean, it's one thing to see that shit happen on TV. It's another thing to hear secondhand stories from family members that were on the island when it happened. But for you to be one block, and anybody that knows a New York block, it's like a linear thing, right? Every New York block is about the same size. The New York block, which is not really that far, considering that you were there when that first building fell. Like, how did that kind of jumpstart you into diving more into the space that you're in right now?
So really it didn't really jumpstart me in terms of going into the space that I'm in right now. It really just was a fork in the road, right? Like it was a fork in the road because of circumstance that I ended up going to work for my family, and my family business was in healthcare. I moved back out to Long Island because I just needed some space from the city. And, the family business, it was really, really new. So my mother was an RN when we came to the US and when we migrated to the US. And, she did that for a while. And when we moved to Long Island, she started her first company, which was a healthcare staffing company. And through that business, she was essentially hiring nurses and then servicing home care patients, elderly patients who lived at home. So, she grew that for a little while. And when I left banking and I went back to Long Island, I was just like, hey, I'll come into the office, answer the phones, give you a hand. And, I think that's the inception of who I became. Like, that's when I realized, like, in hindsight, that's the point where like every skill set was already part of who I am. And that really was just a hyper aggressive way of ingesting information and applying information. Like, I don't need to be in your business for like 60 days, 90 days, 12 months to figure out what you're doing. I literally can have a conversation with you. And if that conversation is expansive and really kind of deep in terms of like giving me an understanding, like the problem solving component of my mind, the mechanical component of how I think, the operational component of how I think essentially kicks in. But then there's an ability to absorb information really, really, really quickly, and then apply that information to synthesize that information to like a solution or a process or an operation that will affect the situation, right? Or affect a result. So for me, that, working in that space for a really short period of time, I think it was only there for like a year. And then we started like growing the business, and it went from just not only home care, it went from like long-term care nursing homes, right? Long-term care facilities to hospitals. And then the business was growing so fast that we had one office in Long Island, in like the middle of nowhere, Long Island. Like, you have to take an hour-long train. It was impossible to recruit people because nurses from the city would have to come to Long Island to get recruited and sign up and all this other stuff. And, it was the bottleneck. So, we took a leap, and she opened up an office in the Empire State Building, my office, which I ran for, essentially the entire time it was there. And that office, honestly, I'm like 20 something years old, and my office is the size of like 1,000 square feet over, the 41st floor of the Empire State Building. That's just my office. That's not the entire office. I'm just like, dude, this is amazing. Like, and I'm the head of operations at that point, head in charge of recruiting, in charge of the entire team at that location. And, I think at one point we had recruited like 3,000 people in 1 year. Like, that's insane. That's like, I remember we were bringing in like these, remember when they still had like file drawers, where, those gray file drawers? Yeah. So we were just bringing in just to keep the records for everyone that we were hiring. It was, it was a monumental effort to supply, because it was a revolving door. You would hire one person on Tuesday, they would work the week, and then they decided, hey, we don't want to go to Long Island. And that's when we were just like, something, let's just get hospitals in the city, and essentially expanded to opening up relationships with hospitals in the city. Rivington House was an AIDS facility, that one of the facilities I managed, and we had NYU and a bunch of other facilities around the city. But we grew that business really, really quickly. And that business is really where I learned how to work till my eyes bled. Like, literally, I would work from like 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight, probably later than that, because it was always something to do. There's always just more to do. And we had, it was a really interesting time in my life. Like, it was when the beast mode of like really being someone who knows how to grind, really getting my feet deep into like that space. I learned how to do, put together financing packages for, debt, right? So one of the things in that business is like, it's really low margin. We're competing on price, and we're going in, let's call it 10, 15% lower than the next person, the person who's currently supplying that hospital. So the hospital, if you have 100 people there and you're saving 10, 15%, it's a big win. So we were able to get a lot of contracts just based on price, right? Pricing, because we're a smaller firm, we're more agile, we can hire quicker, we can get people into the hospital faster, while still keeping, all the checks and balances in place to make sure, the right people are going in. But learning how to put together finance packages, right? I started learning how, debt works, right? So when you're leveraging receivables for debt, which became literally the foundation of my actual 15-year business, was from that one company, which is like, oh, this is how I can leverage a receivable for a loan and then use that loan to finance my business. And you get to learn. I had a handful of relationships coming out of that. But one of the key things was knowing who the good lenders were, right? Like, coming out of that with like, these are really good lenders, because they're not predatory. They'll literally eviscerate your business if you have that structure in place. Like, the new thing now, probably the last 5 years prior to the pandemic, was like merchant cash advances, MCAs, right? And when that came about, I was like, yeah, this seems like, they help businesses to a certain extent if you just need it for like a stopgap. But like, by that time I was already 10 years in, and I already had like the ability to help clients who would have gone that path, to really get different financing in place, better financing in place. But not everything can be done, right? So some clients, their businesses are difficult, and their situations are difficult, and it was really just understanding that. And in my consult, really trying to understand how, based on what my knowledge base was, and based on the relationships I had, how I can help those clients, really grow their businesses.
Nice. I want the listener that's listening to the episode. I mean, obviously he's telling his story. He's nonchalant about it, and he's telling you a depiction of like what, not necessarily like wealth management looks like, but I want you to kind of think about it. He talked about a story about he started off doing parties, right? From those parties, then he was at the World Trade Center. From the World Trade Center falling, then he moved into his family business, and from his family businesses, that's when he kind of get into like understanding like equity raises, understanding leveraging debt, and then the debt itself being a package that opens up opportunities, whether it's real estate, whether it's I think you did real estate, you also did like
film,
ventures and movie
television.
capital, all this type of stuff from debt. So I want to like dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, one of the key things with me, for anyone who's watching this, and, I've never had a business card. I've never had a website, and I can build websites, not good websites, but I can build websites. I used to manage a creative company that built websites for some of my clients because it was a need that they had. And I was like, something, I'm paying someone else to do this. I might as well just bring this as a different revenue stream, and I'll just build a website, hire a developer and have them do it, and take a management fee on top of that. Right. So, but I've never personally, for any of my businesses, had websites or marketing. I've never done even a networking session. I've never done a networking session in my entire career. I've never done a networking session. A networking thing is when you go, what it is, like you go to a business meeting. It just wasn't my vibe. I'm very antisocial in that way. I was really fortunate, really, really, really fortunate to, I think it's almost like a God blessing where I really only had to focus on doing the work, and work just came for 12, 15 years, work would just come in. Every month I would have something to work on. In the last 5 years, I had more work than I actually needed. I had to actually become hyper selective about the kind of transactions that I wanted to engage in, because I'd seen everything, and at a point could have selected the type of clients that I wanted to work with. So how I went from that space in doing the healthcare business to what you call was really on this good mind for operations, having a good mind for legal contracts, having a good mind for finances, and really kind of understanding how businesses are financed and what debt structures and capital structures look like, what type of capital exists, equity, debt, mezz, all this other type of stuff, especially financing. So the interesting stuff starts coming to your desk, right? So I had a friend who was like, hey, I'm in the movie business, blah, blah, and can you do this deal? And I was like, yeah, I don't do movie deals. I have no idea how to even start that. And I was just like, no, it's not really my thing, but send it to me. Maybe I'll know someone package. And they sent me the script, and I was like, dude, me reading the script is like reading a menu. Like I just see words. I don't really have that kind of imagination when I'm reading a script. I'm like, oh yeah, he's like slaying a dragon. Like to me, it's just, oh, okay, cool. Like, where's the financial package? Where's the business package, right? Send me that information so I can understand like who I can go to with this and how it can get structured and what leverage there is inside of that package, so I can present it to the people that I know and I work with, because they're probably least concerned about the script. They're probably going to be concerned about who's in the movie, because that is a driver for the revenue, right? So yeah, it does some interesting stuff. I want to say who, some of the stuff that I've worked on, but I'm also like, part of my business is hyper privacy. But a few of the films that I've worked on have been nominated for Academy Awards. I think one of them actually won. And this is in the last, like I would say 5, 6 years. But yeah, I think a key part of my business and why, my clients trust me is because, I have very strict privacy. Like I maintain their privacy in their, what you call it. So I don't really share their business. But, it's really interesting. One of the deals I worked on, after the deal, the initial transaction got done, like I think a year later, the producer and the lender actually started a new company, a new entertainment company. And that company in the last 5 years did like 15, 20 films, some of which is on Apple TV now. So you can watch a lot of those films now, but that's honestly the least of like the interesting stuff. I'll tell you a story about the first time I ever got a film deal financed, and that was probably the most interesting situation. So I'm traveling Guatemala some years ago for a friend's wedding while also working on a film transaction. And, the day that I was supposed to be in the jungle was also the day that the film was closing, the transaction to finance the film was closing. So when it closed, I was actually standing on top of a Mayan temple in deep in the Guatemalan jungle, overlooking the entire jungle, and across, probably about half a mile away was another temple that peaks above the tree line. So I'm standing there and there's tourists around me. I'm like, did we get the contract? Did we get it done? We got it done. Oh shit, we got it done. And I'm literally on top of a temple in the jungle closing a deal. And my attorney's like, yeah, we signed the paperwork. Everything is the wire is going to come through before you come out of the jungle. I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And that was literally where I was, what I was doing when I closed my first movie deal. It sounds crazy, but yeah, that was and that's the deal that kind of put me into, from that, when people were like, oh yeah, this guy can help you get your film financed. That's when people started reaching out to me about film financing, and a lot more of the projects came about. But yeah, that was, in terms of that felt special.
Nice. So with that, right? I mean, obviously, we're telling your story, and we jumped around from different sectors, right? So I mean, the perception is obviously overnight success stories are things that are heard pretty frequently, right? But in reality, how long have you been on your journey to get you to where you are currently?
I'm 41. The last corporate job I had was Thomson Reuters. So I joined Thomson Financial. I want to say 2006, 2007. And I quit Thomson Financial. I retired from Thomson Financial. I want to say 2009. Yeah, 2009, 2010. So since then, I've never had another corporate job ever since then. Never wanted to go back, never had to go back, never even looked backwards at maybe this was a bad idea. I mean, the struggle was real. When I left Thomson, I had one or two clients, and they weren't great big clients. They were paying, $1,000 here and there. And for me, I always had the mindset that you're going to pay your dues, and you're going to have to prove yourself that you can do business consulting. You can help a client grow their business, and from that, you can then start, building a business around that. I had a substantial history before I left Thomson. I had done the banking thing. I left bank and I went back and built the healthcare business. So I had a substantial amount of experience from that. When I took the job at Thomson, the interview went something like this. Yeah, I'm interviewing at Bloomberg as well. I think they're going to make me an offer, but you guys are 4 blocks from my house. I'd much rather work here. But your call. And I walked out. I walked out of the interview, and then before I left the building, my recruiter called and was like, "Yeah, you got the job." And then I was like, oh, "Okay, cool. I saw on Monday." And then, yeah, it was. I was in a position where I was young and really stupid. I was just hyper confident in my skill set and what I had already accomplished, and I was coming off of I wasn't really going back to work because I needed to. I was going back to work because I was kind of just bored and I really wanted to work. And then Thomson Financial was a strategic move. It was either Bloomberg or Thomson. I didn't want to go into financial space working for a hedge fund or something like that. It just wasn't my vibe. But I did want to be in the space where there are 2 huge players in the market, specifically for what they do, data and kind of the technology piece, right? So yeah, I was I'll add that to my resume and then I'll leave and I'll build off of that. And that's exactly what I did. I went in, I started even though I was coming from a COO role, I was something I'll just do this as keep me busy. So I took an analyst role and I grew that into kind of helping my director run the department. And then, from there grew the business and grew the team. Really kind of invested heavily in networking inside of the company. So I knew all the managers across the entire business unit, all the managers up and down the business. And that really helped make me extremely effective at my job. Then I left. Thompson Financial merged with Reuters. I was part of the, I was working on some of the integration pieces. I was seeing some of the contracts that were involved with some of the larger clients. And, for me, I was just like, I could do this and I could make $250,000 easy. I can grow my career easily in that space and be like a corporate guy. And it wasn't in me. Like I lived in FIDI. So like every day I would see people walking to and from work and they just looked miserable. They just looked absolutely miserable. Like just worker bees going to go, put a round peg in a square hole every single day. And I'm like, nah, I can't do this. So I quit, started my own company, and started consulting. And one of my first clients was in cosmetics, and they were doing some sort of like holistic cosmetics thing. And operationally was helping them support that, trying to figure out how they can raise money and stuff like that. But it just grew. Like one thing led to another, led to another client, led to another client, led to another client. And then, I explored different things like, doing what I call the social media roundtable, when location-based services were just now taking off. I was like, how can we make social media like applicable? Like, how do we use it? We know businesses know that they knew back then that they needed to incorporate social media in some respects. Location-based services was really big, like Foursquare and a few others, and Foursquare essentially dominated the market at one point. They became the market leader, the only one standing. And how do you use that to drive revenue, right? And one of the things I did was I started pulling together all of my contacts from every area that I knew, different skill sets, right? So I would bring in people from like Wonderman and BBDO and Ogilvy, and they would be at the round table. And then I would bring in an attorney and a financial consultant and a tax consultant and just people with different skill sets, right? People who would be part of what building a company would be. Like if you have a business, you need a lawyer. If you have a business, you need someone who understands marketing. If you have a business, you need someone who understands operations, and et cetera, et cetera. So I had all these people at this social media roundtable thing that I used to do, and they would all just weigh in on one specific topic for 60 minutes. And essentially, how do we utilize this thing, whatever that thing is, to drive a business in the only way that matters to a business potentially at that point, which was bringing customers through the door and driving revenue. Because if you're not doing those two things, I mean, like all the other stuff that you do for your business, if you're not doing those two things, like you're not really growing the business. You potentially are growing the business in different ways, but like the bottom line is always the bottom line, right? Like revenue is revenue, profit is profit. So you can do all the other stuff, but if it's not affecting that thing, and that's always been my focus, like how do you make the company more profitable? How do you drive revenue, right? Everything is bottom line driven. And that's the simplest way I can describe the core foundation of my consulting, right? So any business, how do I drive revenue?
You're talking about like foundation, and I think that's a good segue to kind of talk about, you mentioned like your family business. And I think in particular, right, like this question is like, do you have any entrepreneurs in your family? And I would say hands down, because I know your mom is a hustler. There's no question about that shit through and through. So the question would be like, how much do you think seeing her hit the ground coming from, the islands, we're both from the Caribbean, and your mom coming here, being a nurse, and then taking the opportunity to take a nurse into a business and then take that business from Long Island to the damn Empire State Building. That's a hell of a story in her journey, but you were a part of that. So how effective was that in creating who you are?
To this day, literally to this day, and I'm a savage. Like even this past week, like this past 2 weeks, 8 a.m. till midnight, almost, I would say 4 days a week, 5 days a week, maybe. Like I'm a savage. Like I treat my body like I will push it to the limit in terms of like I'm driving 2 companies now, right? Like I have a hotel business, which I'm responsible for really capable people. I'm talking about like my team isn't like some random people off the street. These guys are coming from like my CFO is coming from Fortress. The CEO has coming from a hedge fund. Operations is coming from high level engineering from major firms. My team is my creative director is a known entity in the fashion space, and she runs a interior design business and her family is built one of the biggest brands in fashion, multi-billion-dollar brand. These are people that I have a deep amount of respect for, and I value their time, their energy, their effort, their input, and but in context of my mother, like she's on a complete, I mean, she's pushing, I think she's around 60 now, something like that. And even to this day, I can't outwork her. Like we can go head to head. She will to this day still outwork me. And that's where I get it from. Like we don't, one of the things her influence in my life is strictly, I wouldn't say strictly, but one of the most impactful things in her presence in my life is seeing how like focused she is on accomplishing the things she wants to accomplish, and watching her work, not necessarily like her teaching me how to work, studying how she works, and the intentionality, the focus, the drive, the ambition behind it. Like she sets really big goals and she goes out and win, lose or otherwise, like she aggressively goes after the things she wants. And for me, that's the same. I'm the same way. Like I set some hyper ambitious goals. I mean, ambitious is an understatement. I'm trying to build a hotel and a tech company at the same time, literally parallel. Half my calls on a daily basis are with my Sojourner team, and half my calls on a daily basis are with my publishing team. So yeah, it's that's where I get it from. So for me, it's just genetically infused. I think she gave me the drive. I have my father was a mechanic. I didn't really know my father, but like he's a mechanic, so I have that kind of like process driven mind that I'm really good with my hands. But mentally, like that same kind of like way a mechanic would think about fixing things is kind of where that problem solving aspect of who I am came from.
Nice. So, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously you're telling me it's like your days are, and obviously I had I think you and I share that same commonality. We'll work until the sun comes up and then recycle that shit and just keep going. But with that, I mean, like, what is your morning routines? I mean, obviously every single day, whenever you do decide to wake up, what's the first things that you do on a routine basis?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I started your podcast, and when I say started, I listened to your podcast, generally speaking, but coming on because I was, again, this kind of public stuff was, I've never needed to be in public, right? Like, and so, for me, when I was listening to everyone kind of tell the story, I'm like, wow, these guys really have like an amazing routine. My routine every morning is I get up and I do my Bible study, my devotionals. I pray. I take my dog for a walk, 15, 20 minutes. I get some quiet time in that space. I I don't read. I read the news to the extent that like it informs something that I'm working on. I think generally speaking, the news is extremely depressing. But I think it's mission critical that you understand what's going on in the world around you. And I think, it just makes you a much more well-informed, well-rounded individual in terms of like having a perspective about the world around you and why certain things are happening and what's actually happening. But yeah, my morning routine is super simple. Like I wake up, I pray, I study the Bible, I study, a couple of chapters, and or a Bible plan that's on my app. I walk my dog. I call one or two people that like have no business intention, just like, hey, what's up? Like just checking in, make sure you're okay, blah, blah, blah. Set that kind of like personal time between, I would say 6 and 8, depending on what time I wake up. And yeah, I mean, my morning routine and it's the anti-go button. Like I'm not doing anything that's like hyper productive. It's my first like breath of the day and just like relax, easing into it, and then go. Like come that first phone call of the day till the last phone call of the day, it's just 100% go.
Nice. So I mean, with that, right? I mean, this is probably one of like my favorite questions, and you and I, we've been on and off the same spectrum for like forever. So I'm really interested because I never really had opportunity to really ask you this question. Is like, what books have you read on your journey to get you to where you are? And the second part to this question is, what books are you actively reading right now? And the third part to this question is probably going to be the question that I'm putting my thumb on your back is, have you had opportunity to write any books? And if you haven't, what the fuck are you waiting for?
Yeah, so I only read books that are like self-help books, right? Like things that are going to help me understand either myself or a new process, a new way to think, something that like legitimately I read it and apply it, right? Like it's one-to-one. Like yeah, it's been a while since I've I've sat down or had time to sit down and really read a book from cover to cover. I've read a bunch of Malcolm Gladwell, I've read a bunch of kind of like Outliers and all the other stuff, like, just the regular things that you should read, right? Because they're very, very good. But, like these days I'm reading things about hotel development, right? So like, things I'm studying papers on the work, and I'm studying papers on how to do land diligence. I'm studying legal reviews on how to, like, I really only study things that are one-to-one. Like I read it and it's a knowledge base now that I can tap into when I'm applying it to something directly that I'm involved in. Right. So I don't do like leisure reading essentially. Like you're not going to see me reading like a Harry Potter or like whatever. Right. So it just, one, bandwidth wise, I just don't have, I've never made the time to do it essentially. And for good or bad, whatever it may be, like it is what it is. I think for me, the things that for in terms of like, I do. So right now I'm reading a book. I think it's Ansel Adams on photography, because one of the things I'm really passionate about is photography. I have like a $5,000 rig, a Sony A7R4 with like prime lenses and all the crap and all the stuff that goes with it. And for me, that is where I put my time and energy. So I will read books on photography, studying the craft, studying how to use my camera, studying the art of it, and then go again and apply that, because I'll take my camera out and I'll go into street photography. I'll do whatever it is. Like I'll go out into the world and I'll shoot, but like that's my Zen zone. That's like the thing that I literally am not thinking about anything else. I just have my music in, I have my camera, and I'm in a space where like I feel inspired, or I'll try to go out and feel inspired about shooting something. But in terms of like books, yeah, I don't do any casual reading at all, like at all. And that's not because I don't want to. It's just bandwidth wise, like I know the things that really kind of like bring me down and kind of give me my peace. And that's really like, it's just, I study something and I apply it. Like whether it's photography, I apply it. Whether it's even like post-production, right? Like I shoot and I'm not really satisfied with the image. So then I'll study, hours and hours in the background while I'm working. I'll have a YouTube on with a channel of a photographer that I appreciate his work, and he has insights in how to make like how to do editing. So I have a full Adobe suite, right? I have every single program, and I don't use it professionally. I just use it because like, oh, so this is how I get this to look like this, and I'll study that in the background while I'm also actually doing my work. If I'm sending out emails or if I'm writing a contract or something, I'll just have that on the background because I'm absorbing that information passively. And if I see something that's interesting, like, oh yeah, I can just go back and But yeah, it's funny. I know you have a huge book club and you have all these books that and I can't add any value there because I don't really anything specific that I'm reading is really very, very specific to the business that I'm doing.
Nice. So, I mean, going into like, where do you see yourself? I mean, obviously, you got a lot of things going on. You're talking about a hotel on one hand, and you're doing hotel management. You're creating a hotel from scratch. On the other hand, you're creating an application, a startup, and that's going pretty much big data. So, that's two separate spectrums of the damn world, right? Where do you see yourself in 20 years?
Yeah. So Sojourner is the hotel company. The idea behind Sojourner is, coming out of the pandemic, we have a new way of travel. So I think the way people travel will change. And I saw that as an opportunity. Again, like one of my early mentors taught me about looking for opportunities in disaster. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I mean, and that really came after 9/11. Where were the opportunities in that massive disaster? And it's a very capitalist way of looking at things. But I mean,
It's the world we live in. So
yeah, I mean, like, I didn't capitalize on that at all, but like a lot of people have. And I'm not saying that like it's a good thing, but there are opportunities in disaster, and that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So for me, when I saw what's happening with the pandemic and all the crazy stuff and the way the dynamic of the world was changing, the new paradigm that we're in, one of the areas that I love is traveling. I've traveled a lot. I mean, a lot. I've stayed at some really dope places. I've eaten at some of the best restaurants in the world, like Michelin star stuff, in multiple continents, multiple countries, multiple cities. Like I love traveling. It's one of the things that I didn't think I would get to do, coming from where we come from, right? So, for me, when I have an opportunity to travel, I travel. So looking at that, I thought, how are people going to travel now and drive to? So we establishing Sojourner as kind of a business geared to drive to market. So usually within 2.5 hours, 3 hours of a major city. The first one for us is going to be in Hudson, New York, or close to in the Hudson Valley of New York. And we're working on that currently. And the idea is that, like, you have these really beautiful cabins, so individual cabins that are simple in structure, but beautifully designed, beautiful interiors, a place where you can go and it feels like home, right? The essence of what we're trying to do is, I'm not sure if you travel and how often you travel, what you're kind of like, what you're, what you look for when you travel. But for me, when I go to a place and you get in, you're like, holy crap, you just like, every stress of getting that you're going on a vacation, you want to have like a complete decompression or whatever it is, even if you're traveling for adventure or whatever it is. When you arrive there, just want to feel like completely just like, wow, like you just want to have that sense of like peace, right? That sense of zen, that moment of just like, wow, this is going to be a nice place to stay. So essentially we're building that into that. That's what we're driving to. But that's the result. That's what we want people to feel when you come to a Sojourner location, resort. So it's membership driven. It's still open to the public, but it's membership driven. Our first location will be open in like 2 years, 2023, spring, summer 2023. And we aim to kind of do this at scale. So we're looking at things like prefabrication, so that while we're developing the land asset, the actual structures themselves can literally are happening in parallel. Really looking for ways to scale that business quickly. So that's going to require a lot of investment. We raised some capital already, and raising more equity for the first location. And once we prove out the model that it works and our thesis is correct, then we're going to expand to several locations concurrently around the country. And potentially in the Caribbean as well. Costa Rica is a good target. Not Trinidad, but Tobago is a good target. We own some land down there. Potentially, we're looking to expand relatively quickly. I want to have 10 of these locations up in the next 10 years. They're not all going to happen in, like we're not building one a year. What will happen is that we build several concurrently, because that's my goal in how I look at building out my team, right? So, and in terms of the publishing platform, I'm getting to a point. I'll get to my point, but so my goal is to build out Sojourner and essentially in 10 years look to, either put someone in place to manage it and then go retire, or sell it to someone who's interested in taking it from us and continuing what we've established. With CHRON, right now it's called CHRON, but that's the underlying kind of platform, the technology platform. We're developing a search engine for news. So one of the key things coming in 2020 was that, actually before even 2020, I think one of the biggest issues we have right now is that like there's so much misinformation, and that misinformation is really eradicating the way we as a general public view this world and the space we live in. And it's hyperpolarized, it's extremely opinionated, it's destructive to a healthy democracy, right? So for me, I look at like, how do you access news today? And most of the really high quality news is behind, and there's always some skewing, and depending on how, which news outlets you get your news from, there's always, some leaning left, right, or the other. I don't really think there's anything that's really straight down the middle. Sorry about that. So we're developing a news platform that's a search engine for news at its core. So you can it will tie into every single at some point it will tie into every single news publisher across the globe, and then translate all of that information into a native language, right? Secondarily to that, essentially, if you go to Google and you type in, you're looking for a topic like global warming or Afghanistan or whatever it might be that you're searching for, typically the high quality news links are behind a paywall. So Google will push those results way down. It will return those results way down the list, right? So what we're looking to do is kind of change that dynamic and give people real access to real news that's behind a paywall and on an article by article basis. So for us, it's establishing two things. One, relationships with the publishers, and relationships where we can essentially monetize every single article that's ever been published online digitally, and make that readily available in a Google search. So CHRON, when you search for something, it delivers a result visually on a timeline. So if you search for Donald, I don't want to be Asian orange, but if you search for global warming, right? And global warming has been a topic for the last, let's call it 50 years. So, but it has trends. So it will not only display the results on a timeline, so you can say, you can zoom into like the first 10 years that it was a topic, and you can go granularly down to every single news publisher, every single news article that was ever published. And then once you click on that, it will hyperlink you out to the news publisher. But then that news publisher benefits in several different ways. One, more eyeballs across their actual article, and two, the actual user gets to view that article that might be behind a paywall. And if they're paying, our goal is to keep the pricing around like 25 cents per article. So if you're looking for a topic and you're really interested in like podcasts, right? Who's the top 10 podcasts or whatever you're searching for, interested in, you get high quality results because you get to actually get behind the paywall and really read and get the quality news versus kind of the stuff that's, just readily available, but not as high quality. So I think there's a huge value there for the user. There's a huge value there for the publisher because we're generating revenue for that publisher. Eventually, we're hoping to release this platform in, I would say, late December, early January. and it's no subscription to it. Essentially, you just sign up and you get to use the platform. And as you read articles across any of the publishers on our platform, you just, essentially you get it's 25 cents per article, and you can read as many or as little as you want. Our goal is to allow people who would go to like a major publisher and hit a paywall, and they're like, something, even if it was 10 cents, I'm not subscribing on a monthly basis. Even if it was $4, I'm not subscribing on a monthly basis. And that's like, 60% of the people that hit that paywall, if not higher, right? So most people just don't have that inclination to want to subscribe, not to just one publisher, any publishers, right? Regardless of what the price is on a monthly basis. So we solve a problem, a huge, huge problem for like a lot of people who want access to good news, but from a psychological basis, from a mentality basis, won't subscribe because there's that thought of like, oh, I'm going to be paying this price every single month, and like, what's the value add? Like, people hate subscriptions now, right? People almost, when cable boxes were a thing, and people were unboxing, cutting the cord. Now, like, subscriptions are the same way. People want to have access to news, but no one wants to pay for it on an ongoing basis. I think I would pay for it if I was like, hey, I read like 3 or 4 articles a week. I don't want to spend $4 a month. I don't even want to spend $1 a month, right? So 25 cents, I could read as many or as little articles I want. And then I think that's a value add for me, and it's a value add for the publisher, because now, hypothetically, if you have 100 million people hitting your paywall, and only, let's say, on a best case scenario, you have 40 million people actually getting behind that paywall, you still have 60 million people that aren't seeing that content, right? That's 60 million people on a monthly basis that, one, can drive up your page views, which drives up your ad revenue, which drives up all the metrics that you need to drive the business. But now you're getting additional revenue because 60 million people reading 2 articles a day at 25 cents. That's a huge amount of revenue for any publisher. So, the business is designed to help both sides. It's hopefully it's going to be a very disruptive business. And a lot of it happens seamlessly. I think one of the key things with CHRON is, if you look at some of the other platforms, like, some of the major platforms, and I'm not a big fan of calling anyone out, because everyone has their own vision for their business, and I don't knock anyone for how they vision their business or how they approach their business. But if you look at some of the other major platforms, there's always this need to take an article that's published, pull it into a third-party app, and then essentially deliver that as a subscription or as a mechanism to the end user, right? Which, one, it takes eyeballs off of the publisher, right? And then it gives the user a very limited cross-section of everything that's available from that publisher. Like, when you go to, whatever news app that you use, that basically, brings all the news sources into one app, you're never going to see every single, you're never going to have a good, like, you're never going to see every single article from any one publisher, because they essentially pull the top articles of the day that they decide and show that to you, right? With us, if you just like reading New York Times, just go to New York Times and read all the articles, or as many of the articles or as little of the articles that you want on that single publisher. And I'm using that as a reference, but like, because I'm in New York, that's the one that I read. But yeah, for us, that's kind of the driving goal. So in 10 years, I think if we do our jobs correctly, CHRON is going to be CHRON right now, which is the underlying platform. It's going to be hopefully $1 billion company, if not sooner. And Sojourner would be a mark, right? It's for me, it's a great business. I think it's going to really be successful in terms of the financial components, because that's, when you have investors and you have that responsibility, you have to make it successful that way. But I think it's going to be successful in the terms of like just doing something a little bit different, taking a different approach to how people travel, taking a different approach to how people feel when they travel, right? One of the things that we are keen on is the experience. So when you arrive, you're treated as a person. We know your name. We give you the space, but we also be able to help you. There's a level of like kindness, right? So you arrive and you just feel like the people who work there truly care about you and your experience, and they want you to have an amazing time while you're there. Or you can stay in your cabin and have an amazing experience inside of that space. And or, right? So for us, I think the overall goal for Sojourner is just, you know, if the thousands of people that will come to one of our locations leave with a memory that they can hold on to, that's the that would be an accomplishment. That would be a huge win for us.
So I mean, with that, I think that's a good way to segue into like the next question. I mean, you're talking about leaving behind something for somebody to hold on to. So my next question on that note would be your final words of wisdom for anyone that's listening to this podcast and hearing you speak and hearing that you're multifaceted. You're a lot like me in the sense you're highly creative, but you're also highly analytical. How does that work, and what words of insight would you give to someone to help them to push forward on their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so I thought about that coming into this, and I think you have to have an understanding of who you are, right? If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to really know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and really, generally speaking, have an appreciation for the people around you. There's this saying that like I used to hear people say this all the time, and I had some context around it, and it changed my perspective. I'm a self-made person. I did all of this by myself, and like I built this, and it was just no man's an island, right? Like even if you are, you're always dependent on the people around you and other people to help. Like you can't ever accomplish anything on your own. And because you can't do that, you have to really understand like what my strengths and weaknesses are with the hotel company. I am someone who is very keen on the financial components. I'm very keen on the operational components, and I literally rely on everyone else. But their input, their expertise, their experience is invaluable to me, right? And I treat people well, not even as good as I can. I treat people the way I want to be treated. So for me, as an entrepreneur, all the books, and you can study anything that you want about whatever business. You want to open a coffee shop, you can study all the best coffees in the world and like how to make things, how to grind your coffee a certain way, the best pour overs and all the other stuff, the technical pieces and how to make that business work. The one thing I think is really understanding what the capacity is that you have as a person, right? So like I have a high, very, very high tolerance for stress. Like nothing phases me, almost nothing phases me. It becomes overwhelming when it's like it's an endurance race, like 6 months of like hard grinding. You need to rest, but I have a very high tolerance for stress. I know my mindset in terms of problem solving, and those two things kind of like a foundation. And also now it's really kind of like see value in the people around you, right? And know how to bring that value and really work with that value. Try to see people for the value, not the stuff, not the what you call it. And that's one of the experience. One of the things I'm going, not for the negative things, right? See the positive things in people, and that will help you drive whatever it is you do, whatever business it is. Like even this podcast, right? Like the value here is our friendship, and we've known each other. But for me, I'm not here to promote a business that's active right now. Like no one can go to Sojourner right now. No one can pull up CHRON right now. No one, like for me, where the value here is the conversation, right? Like if something I can say here is really going to help educate, right? So, or help someone on their path, then that's exponential value to me. I don't know when that, how that will work for someone else, or what if I'm saying is actually valuable to anyone else. But for me, my experience is, if you really want to do this work, and being an entrepreneur sounds fancy and all this other stuff, like you can quit your job and try to you build your company. I think it's an amazing thing, and but just be prepared, because like it's not for the faint of heart. Like no matter what you do, right? No matter what if you've had some some, what you call it, some like, what's what I'm looking for? Some advances, some advantages, right? Like, you know, maybe you have $500,000 in your bank account. Like the work and it's taxing, it's grueling, it's punishing, it's also the most rewarding thing you can do, right? Like you control on a day-to-day basis how your life can materialize, right? Like I get up and I put in 10%, I get 10% back. I might get 5% back. I might get 0 back. I get in and put up 90%, I might get 90% back. I might get 0 back, right? So be prepared to work really hard, be prepared for the struggle, be prepared for a lot of the stuff, but also be prepared for the joy. But I think, right, because there's so much joy in seeing, like, you can't, you know, as a, and I'm only speaking because my perspective is as a man, right? Like, we can't, the things that we can create are taking an idea and turning it into something real, like a physical, like an actual thought, and then materializing that in the real world, like you with your books, right? And all the other things that you've created, right? You have an idea in your head and you can actually like bring that thing into the physical world and share that with other people. Like that's an amazing thing. And there's nothing, regardless of how hard it is and how difficult it is, there's really nothing that beats that. And the ability to say, hey, I had an idea for this widget and I turned that idea for a widget into like a real widget and I sold one of those things to someone. That's an amazing thing. And I think you do that once, you get hooked and you're like, I want to keep doing this, right? And you got to figure out a way to like really, you know, whether or not you have the capacity to handle everything else that comes with it, right? For me, it's what I've learned is that people, and it's not even like I learned it, it's just more like an acknowledgement of something that I've always carried, like has always been part of my business. People matter. People matter. That's it. Like I've never had to network. I've never had to have like marketing or anything else. I treated people really well and I took care of my clients. I did my job and it's carried me for 15 plus years. And now from that experience, I'm building 2 companies that I think, regardless of win, lose, or win or fail, like win or lose, like I think they're amazing ideas. And the people that I'm working with are ridiculously good people, amazing people. And that is, you know, that's where I'm having the most fun. Like every day I have calls with both teams and like I'm excited to do that, right? Excited to solve another problem. Being an entrepreneur is 99% every single day solving 99 problems. That's it.
Nice. So how do people get in contact with you if they want to? Like, where are you on social media or email or website?
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of presence and so on any kind of like platform. I'm on Instagram with my photography at Long Live CHRON, and it's really just only photography and writing and stuff. But what I do want to do with this time, if you don't mind, is I actually want to use this time in a way that's like super helpful to someone else that actually really, really needs the help right now. A very close friend of mine, someone I care about a lot, someone I served in church with, someone that, I have a lot of respect for. She's like 30 years old and she just got diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer. And they're raising a GoFundMe now to help support that and help with the bills on that. And I would much rather use this platform, despite all the things I'm talking about with my 2 companies, with the CHRON and Sojourner and everything else. None of that matters, right? I think this person generally is a really, really amazing human being. And if you can use your audience, this platform to, have your audience, like, go check out her GoFundMe page and, whatever they can do that would help accomplish that goal would be the most valuable use of this time for me. I think that to me is the only takeaway that I would want from this experience is if, tomorrow morning I wake up and her goal is fully funded, that would be a huge blessing, because this is a really, really good person that, at 30 years old, and the struggle of stage 4 cancer is insane. Like I literally cannot fathom what that must feel like. So anything I can do to help, and, if this is I'd much rather use this opportunity to like try to help it with that situation than anything else I'm doing with my work.
So what's the GoFundMe account?
It's I think I added the link. It's if you go to GoFundMe and you put in Alyssa Bingham, ALYSSA BINGHAM. She's standing with her nephew against a wall in a white t-shirt, I think. Yeah, just really good person. Would be amazing if you guys can help out.
Nice. So going into closing, I like to do like just a fun bonus. 'Cause I mean, I think you just dropped a lot of information, and it's one of those things where someone's going to have to like stop and rewind and listen to this over and over again to kind of to take the nuggets and utilize the nuggets and take actions on all the different things that you're delivering, and including the GoFundMe account as well. But my next question is, if you could spend 24 hours with anyone, dead or alive, uninterrupted for those 24 hours, who would it be and why?
Yeah, so I thought about that. You asked that question on at the end of all the podcasts.
Every single one, yeah.
I would want to talk to myself at 15. I think there was so much revelation at that age that still, even to this day, and not in a good way, like not good stuff at all. Like when we were growing up, like I had a bunch of revelations that I was like, wow, like even to this day, kind of like planted seeds and like in a negative way that affected the way I thought, the way it affected a lot of kind of like underlying behaviors. I would go back and really tell myself then what I know now, that it really doesn't matter. It's all good. You're gonna have an amazing. I've had a ridiculous life. Like I have a pretty dope life. Like I'm not in the greatest, like, I'm not a multimillionaire. I'm not like some ridiculous whatever. Like I'm not flying off in jet setting or anything like that. But I've done every single thing that I've ever thought. Anything I thought I would want to put my mind to, I've done it. Literally anything I've thought I've wanted to put my mind to, I've done it. And that is incredible. So I would tell my 15-year-old self, chill the fuck out. Like it's all good. And that's in respects to like because to me, like if I could change the way I thought, and that has affected the last 30 plus years, like or whatever, however long 15 is from 41. I think that to me would be that would be like game changer, because I would be in a completely different space right now.
Nice. That's a solid answers, man. So going into closing, I mean, the microphone becomes yours, the show becomes yours. You're the host of the show. What questions do you have for me?
Yeah, man. Honestly, like I don't really have questions for you because I know you well, and I know the trajectory of your life. And while we've had distance, like physical distance, like you're in Atlanta, I'm in New York. Like I'm a kind of person that I know what I tend to like keep tabs on people. Just like I think one of the things I want to say is this: I'm extremely proud of you. Like my puppy's going crazy right now. He wants to go for a walk. I'm extremely proud of like seeing who you became as a man, because we came up in some real crazy circumstances. Like, dude, we had there were like 12 gangs running around New York City when we were growing up, dude. Like, and legit, like it wasn't this like hipster nonsense that's happening. Like, it's not hipster nonsense. It's actually really healthy for the city, but like it's not what it is now, right? Like people think, oh, you see the rap videos and all this other stuff. Like, no, bro. Like it was terrible back then. Like in hindsight, it was a situation. It was pretty bad, right? Like, but also knowing kind of like our family history and kind of like those components of it. Like every one of my close friends from like 10 years old has grown up to be an amazing father, an amazing business person, has had a life that would be like, not a statistic, right? Like we're functioning outside of that kind of like statistic that was expected of, you know, the generation that we grew up in, the era that we grew up in. So for me, I'm extremely proud. I'm extremely like, you know, and if I don't ever get to say it, I'm saying it right now in the show, like you are my role model. Like I think about the people that I don't do comparisons because I live my life. My life is, my trajectory is a little bit is different than anyone else's, and my even Anthony's, right? Like, so for me, I look at what you've done, and I look at the work you've done and how you built your business from Cerebral and all the other stuff and that you've done, and the ideas that you had, and the creative mind that you have. And you were talking, I think one time it was not in the land, you were talking about how you make like a workout thing where you have like essentially like a Iron Man suit where you could work out.
Yeah.
What you call it? I remember the fire log thing that you wanted to do and sell to Home Depot, where you could just like have like those like a wax fire log.
Yeah, digital ruler, the laser ruler. Yeah,
the laser ruler, right? The pencil, what you call it, where you can, you know, just use a pencil and it gives you distance and stuff like that. Like, you know, to me, that stuff, man, like it's incredible. It genuinely is. I'm really proud of you, dude. So I don't have any questions for you. I know, you know, that's stuff we can talk about over some whiskey or whatnot. But like, your audience needs to know, like, this dude, like the way we came up, the level of success, and whatever that success means, right? It may be financial, it may be the fact that you have a great family around you, you have an amazing son, and the fatherhood component of who you are, bro. Wow, dude. I'm not a father, but I'm like a funkle to like 40 kids. Yo, you and Coy have such a ridiculous relationship that like, that's what I want. I mean, I would hope to emulate when my family comes, you know, when that happens. So for me, like, well fucking done. Congratulations. I'm extreme. As a friend, as someone in the business space who knows how the shit goes, you know, as another Black man, as all whatever, right? All the stuff. I look at your life and I'm like, fucking killed it. Like, crushed it. Father of the, like, dude, you had a picture for Coy. I think at one point, every single day of his life was documented. That's another level, bro.
Yeah,
that's another level.
First 9 years.
So I'm extremely proud of you. What's up?
I was saying it was his first 9 years of his life.
Yeah. I'm extremely proud to be associated to you as a person. I'm extremely proud to call you a friend, a brother. I mean, we shared freaking t-shirts and pants at one point in our life. So, you know, you're family, bro. So yeah, man, just keep doing your thing. You know, I wish you all the luck and all the success and all the health, because none of it matters if you're not healthy and you're there to really enjoy it. Yeah, just praying for you. That's it.
Well, man, well, I definitely appreciate it, man. I think this episode was long overdue. I mean, to your point, you know, I've been trying to get you on the show since the dawn, and you know, like we're going into like season 3 now, so it only makes sense, right? It's a season show, so I mean, you came in and put a little curry and spice in it.
You know, they got some good Trinity food down in Atlanta, man.
We definitely do.
But I feel like I got that Trinity thing where, you know, we carry all the weight in our gut. Like I'm usually in pretty decent shape, but like the minute you come off plan, it's like it just doesn't go away. Yeah, but yeah, I'll be in Atlanta, I think, in the next couple of weeks. I'm scouting out some locations down there. I'll hit you up, we got some food and some dinner and whatnot.
Cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you carving out, you know, a chunk of your schedule today to be on the Boss Uncaged podcast, man. I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully you'll have me on again when it's time to actually talk about something that literally I've actually, you know, made real. Like, I think the first one would be up, it will be CHRON. The working title right now is CHRON, but we're gonna rebrand that before we go live with the publishing platform. And I definitely think that, you know, it's going to be really impactful. It's going to be a great experience to see people really benefit from that. So hopefully you have me back on again just to specifically talk about that.
Yep.
And then when Sojourner finally opens up, then maybe I'll be back on again. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate the time.
Gotcha, man. I definitely